Hi, I'm Old Sneelock. Welcome to another episode of Old Sneelock's Workshop. I was watching Mike Rowe today, and you know, sitting in the chair watching him on the computer, and I really like the guy. He talks about things that you think about. So it got me to thinking. Some of the norms that we get all wrapped up in are how we respond to people and how people respond to us. And that took me back to a long, long time ago when we first moved into Coldwater. We lived in an old house on Crippen Street, and there were a lot of people around. And I came from living on Messenger Lake where there was nobody. I mean, there was somebody next door, and there was a little girl lived up on the hill, but we didn't see them every day. They were quite a ways away, and they were busy doing their own lives, and I was 3 when I first remember something being out at the lake, and then I was 7 and we moved. So I never really built close relationships with the people around me. Well, now I was smack dab in the middle of a whole neighborhood where there were lots of kids. There's like 11, 12 kids, and half of them were my age. So I knew a lot of kids all of a sudden. Now, maybe in town that would have been a small amount of people, but for me it was a culture shock. But you quickly learn how to get along with people, and I had 2 older brothers, so it was kind of the Nice Wonder gang moves into the neighborhood. But anyways, the people also were interesting. One of the people that lived around the corner on Tibbet Street was a woman. She was probably in her 60s or 70s. And, at 7, anybody over the age of 30 is just ancient. And so this woman was about retirement age. Maybe a little younger, who knows. But anyways, she was old enough to have a house in town and be married. Her and her husband lived there from the time my uncles could remember people. And my uncles were probably, I'd say 30 or 40 at the time we moved into town. So let's just establish that as being older than me. And my brothers told me about, okay, watch out for her, because she's not eccentric. She had her way of doing things, and she expected the world to behave that way. So it was interesting. And because she was different than what we knew, the stories developed. One of the stories was there was a little room attached to the side of the house, right next to the driveway, just bumped out. And she had a very nice house and had a garage, which was something we didn't have. But she also had an outdoor toilet. And my brothers told me that the building attached to the side of the house was the indoor toilet that she never used. Because who wants to go to the bathroom in their house? She had an outdoor toilet. You went outside and you used the outdoor toilet. So, kind of unusual. But I got to thinking one day, I said, really, in the wintertime, people didn't walk through the snow to go outside to the outside toilet. They had used to call them thunder mugs, or chamber pot, so that you didn't have to get up out of bed and go out to the outdoor toilet. You still had to take it out and dump it, but you got to go inside and put your coat on before you went outside. Well, because she was that way and because she had the outdoor toilet, my uncles, being the young men that they were, decided that it would be fun to go tip over her toilet. That was a thing that you did back in the day. You know, they were never anchored to the ground because you had to move them and shovel out the pit, or fill the pit in and move the toilet to somewhere else. Most people just cleaned out the pit. Or they had somebody come along who was they used to call them honey dippers. Yeah, they didn't want to say what they actually worked with. They called them honey dippers. So, anyways, my uncles, there were 3 of them, Rex, Warren, and Lawrence, went over and tipped over the toilet. And they always tipped it forward so it landed on the door, you know. Well, they did that a couple times. And the lady decided that that was enough. Either her or her husband, because her husband had to go out and put it back up again. And I never interacted with him. So she had her husband go out and move the toilet 3 feet forward. My uncles went over there to move the toilet, walked up behind it to push it, and all of a sudden they were honey dippers. Now that's funny. Years later, now I'm 7 years old, and I'm moved into town, and I'm the proud owner of a roll of caps. I don't have a cap gun because I'm walking to school and I got a roll of caps in my pocket. What do you do with it when you got a roll of caps in your pocket? Well, you make noise. So I stopped along the road and I sat down on the curb and I got out that roll of caps and I got a little stone and I picked them up and I set them on the curb and I went pop, pop, pop. And, you know, it was just kid being a kid, wasn't that loud, wasn't that horrible. But I had picked the curb on Tibbetts Street. And that summer they had paved Tibbetts Street. So they put in new curb and gutter. And they put in the new septic lines, ran water lines, gas lines, had the road tore up the whole summer long. So as I was going to school in the fall, here was this beautiful whitewashed, you know, they did a coating of cement over the curb. This beautiful white curb and gutter and a beautiful road. And if you ever saw this lady's house, and I'm not telling her name, if you ever saw this lady's house, you'd realize that she really liked to have things look good. She spent a lot of time. She had beautiful gardens. She had the house painted. She had everything looking just perfect. And she took real good care of it, and her husband took real good care of it. So here I am, popping caps on the curb in front of her house. She came out on the porch, told me not to do that. Now, I'm either 7 or 8. I forget what year they put the curb and gutter in. But me being who I am, said something derogatory, nothing foul. But I believe I called her a battle axe. Don't know where that came from. It wasn't a term that I heard anybody called. Just something that popped into my head, and I said it. And I went on to school. Oh, I was insufferable. So on the way home, the lady's sitting on her porch waiting for me to walk along. She knows where I am. She knows who. It's all she's got to do in her life. She watches the world. So she's on the porch as I'm walking by, not thinking a thing about what had happened. She said, "You didn't really mean that, did you?" I looked over at her and she said, "I know you didn't mean what you said." I apologized and said, "No, I didn't really mean that," because I really didn't. I was just popping off. And after that day, there was kind of an understanding between us. I had established that I wasn't going to be afraid, and she had established that she wasn't going to tolerate. So the next year, my brother, who had had a paper route, well, actually, he got the paper route the next year. My brother had been mowing her yard. He was 2 years older than me. Well, he got a paper route. That meant that with a paper route, he wasn't out mowing yards too. He was just delivering papers. Now, you delivered papers once a day. If you really wanted to make a living mowing yards and delivering papers, you could do both. But, you know, life being what it is, kid gets one job. That's enough. I'm a kid. I don't want to do two. So the woman ended up with me mowing her yard. Now, Dad had a 18-inch mower. And my brother had gone over there with the 18-inch mower and mowed the yard. And then he'd get out the little clippers and he'd go along and trim the grass around the paths through the yard. I went over and I'm pushing the 18-inch mower and I go up to the house and I say, "I'm here to mow the yard." And she tells me, "Okay, I'm going to pay you $1.50 every time you do it, and I want you to trim." And I said, "I don't trim." Now, who would think that an 8 or 9-year-old boy would say, "Oh, I don't trim. I'm going to establish parameters here. This is what I do and this is what I don't do." But I said, "I'll mow it with this mower, and it won't need to be trimmed when I'm done." So she agreed to that, and I mowed the yard. You didn't need to trim it. 18-inch mower is just a little thing, you know. It's kind of like a pair of hand clippers anyways. So I mowed the yard and didn't need to be trimmed. She was happy with that. So once a week, I mowed her yard. One of the joys of being a young man, especially at that age, and not being afraid to say what you think. You don't get away with a whole lot because you recognize where the limits are, so you don't push them. But at the same time, you're independent. You have the opportunity to say what you think and do what you want to do. So it's a fine time to be alive. And I hope that everybody listening has got the opportunity to be in that situation where you're in charge of your own life. You make your own decisions. And sometimes you make mistakes and you apologize. Makes it so that the world goes around pretty smooth. If you have any suggestions for a new video, questions about today's video, or any of the other videos on the channel, just drop a note in the comments. You know I read them all. Thanks for watching.